weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Weird Science Comics YouTube channel, where I'm going to be reviewing Batman, the Brave and the Bold #1, the new anthology book from DC Comics. Now, I say it's a new book, but if you're like me, the minute that this was announced, you thought, well, this is just Batman Urban Legends Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. It really does feel that way. I was hoping that maybe once we got into it, it would feel a little bit newer and fresher. It kind of doesn't, but still, the Urban Legends book, the problem with that is as it went on, you kind of ran out of characters and stories to tell, and maybe having this one as the Brave and the Bold, you do have a wider palette that you can deal with, a wider range of stories, but still, does that make this first issue feel as fresh and new as a new #1 should? Not fully, but we'll jump into this right after I ask everyone, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the video, enable the notifications, and let me know what you thought of Batman, the Brave and the Bold #1 in the comments below. Now, the first story is a Tom King, Mitch Gerads Batman Joker story. And the best that I can say is if you're a fan of either of them, you'll probably enjoy this. If you're not a fan, though, I don't think this is going to win you over. Personally, I don't care if I ever read another Tom King Batman story again. But here it is, and here we are. And when you get into it, it does have pretty much all of the Tom King tropes and cliches that we always see from him. But in the end, the story just doesn't feel as clever as I think he wants it to be. It's not horrible. It's just kind of boring. And boy, it is miserable. I've said it before, but King always seems to want to have something messed up happen to a child in the first issues of most of the series that he does. And this has that. And it makes everything feel disgusting and miserable. And that's just not my thing. I am a fan of Mitch Gerads' art. The problem is I don't know that I need him with Tom King anymore, because when he gets with Tom King, he's got to do that overdone 9-panel grid deal and everything because of how it plays out and how Tom King writes. It just ends up starting to feel like, yeah, it's not as special anymore. It doesn't have the spark that these two once had. It actually makes me think of, a classic rock band that hasn't really been that big for a while, but each year they get everybody back together and they hit the road to play their couple of hits to their fans. And the fans there, they seem to like it, but it kind of gets, like I said, less and less special each time. And that's kind of what I feel like here. But if you do like King and Gerads, I think that you will like it. Next up is a Stormwatch story by Ed Brisson and art by Jeff Spokes. I don't know who this story is for, and boy, there are a lot of characters thrown at the reader here, way too many for this first story. And it's a grab bag of new and old characters. You get stuff like Peacekeeper 1, from Future State and James Tynion's Batman deal. But you also get Phantom 1 from Ed Brisson's Batman Incorporated recently. But you also get some classic Wildstorm characters and also just regular Shadow, Ravager. It's just a really, really odd mix of characters, and there's so many just thrown at you. And then they're going up against Dr. Husk and Black Hole from Joshua Williamson's Flash Run and Rebirth. And boy, there's just a lot thrown at you. The story feels like it goes on forever. I didn't think it was that interesting. Your mileage may vary if you're really, really into Stormwatch, but I don't even think regular Stormwatch lovers will get into this. I don't know. But I didn't really have a particular character to get invested in or grab onto. I like Ravager. I like Shadow, but just not here. And so by the end, I didn't really have anything to grab onto, and it just felt like a slog to get through. But it looked okay. Next is a Superman story by Christopher Cantwell with art by Javier Rodríguez. And I'll admit, I am not a Cantwell fan in the least, but this was actually okay. It was better than I expected. The Daily Planet needs a hot story. Print's dead. Lois basically tells Clark that if we don't get a big story, this whole paper, it's going down. And she's really relying on Clark to go out and get that story. The problem is the usual Superman stories aren't really cutting it anymore. So you end up where, luckily, a story kind of presents itself to Clark when he ends up getting a package that has this decoder ring, and then you get this map, and it doesn't say drink more Ovaltine. It sets up a pretty cool, pulpy, old-timey, classic-feeling Superman story. And by the time the cliffhanger hits, it even feels like an old-time radio script, like something along those lines. And that really is something that I always enjoy. So it feels like an old-timey story, and I'm kind of there. And if you're not really familiar with the current Clark Kent / Superman identity deal, Christopher Cantwell will get you up to speed there. Maybe take a little too long to do it, but he still ends up getting people up to speed. And it felt like a fun story and ends with a pretty cool cliffhanger. So I actually like that story. But last but not least, you get a black and white alt-future Batman one-shot written and drawn by Dan Mora. I'm a huge Dan Mora fan, and each issue of The Brave and the Bold will have a black and white one-shot. I think the next issue is Joelle Jones. You keep getting these, and that's kind of a disappointment for me because I like this Dan Mora story. I wanted it to continue, but it won't. It's just a one-shot. Maybe it'll continue somewhere else. I hope it does because I thought it was pretty fun and intriguing. It ended up the art. It's Dan Mora, so the art's going to look great. So by the end, it's black and white. I know some people be thrown off by that, but it's Dan Mora's black and white, so I'll take that any day and twice on Sunday. But I thought that it was pretty cool. It's only a couple pages, though, and so by the end, it wasn't enough to tilt the scales here because this was an okay issue. Personally, for me, I don't think it was worth the $8 price tag, but again, your mileage may vary depending on how many stories you like. If you're here for, a Tom King, Mitch Gerads deal, which is what they were really pushing as the main draw, I'm not that into it. So that already puts me behind the 8 ball overall. But there isn't really a story here that I actually buy on its own. I like that Dan Mora story, but it's not enough pages that I would say, oh yeah, I buy that on its own. And the Christopher Cantwell Superman story, it's good, but it's still not great and something I would seek out and buy individually. And I think that by the end, I didn't like enough here to say, yeah, it would be worth that $8. But the art's really good. I'll give it that. But eventually, I said earlier, I got bored with Batman Urban Legends, but it took me a while to get to that point. I'm almost there after this first issue. I don't know if it's just because this feels like Urban Legends Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, or it's just, these stories weren't just hitting with me. But with all that, I'm going to give this, I want to give it a 7, but that feels too high. So I'm going to go 6.9, dude, and go from there. I did like the art throughout, but it just didn't grab me. I don't think that this is something that I'll be sticking around for much longer. I'll see how these first stories go, see what's announced for the second round of stuff. And if it's nothing that ends up, tickling my fancy, I'll probably just drop it. But maybe I'll just keep reviewing it anyway. But I hope that everybody ends up, letting me know what you thought of it. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, enable all the notifications, all that stuff. But here we go. Another week of DC Comics. This wasn't a full-out disaster, so at least that's the positive point. One of the things I want to say by the end here, too, is this isn't a Dawn of DC branded book. This is actually just its own thing. It's kind of its own continuity stuff. It's not a Dawn of DC, and this will continue through the summer when we get the spookiest months of the year, July and August, when there is the Night Terrors with a K. This will actually keep going. So if you do enjoy it, that gives you another option in the summer. But that's it. Thanks, everybody. I hope that you enjoy this more than I did. But, hey, that's how the cookie crumbles. So I'll talk to everybody later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.